This is the new and stronger Specialized 3.1 S-Works motor, 111 Newton meters, 720 watts. It's one of those new full power EMTB motors. And as most of you will know, DJI was sort of the first one, at least one of the mainstream that got a lot of attention. This one is 720. The DJI motor came out as 850 watts, 105 Newton meters, so a bit more power, a bit less torque. We have ridden the DJI motor in the 850 watts version, and unfortunately, just after we sent the bike back, it was upgraded to 1000 watts. But I don't think that makes a lot of difference in most situations, because the power curve of these e-bikes, torque starts out flat and it will ramp down as the power curve hits the maximum power. So when you increase the maximum power without increasing the torque, what you do is you allow the power curve to extend further before flattening out, which means, I believe, most of the changes to the 1000 watts DJI motor will be noticed at higher cadence. And both these motors are plenty powerful at lower cadence. And when I say lower cadence, we're talking up to 100. You have to probably, I assume, go into 110s, 120s perhaps to notice much of a difference between these. But I can't say for sure. So from now on, I will just comment on the 850 watts version of the DJI motor. This is the new Bosch Performance CX Gen 500 Newton meters, 750 watts. This test of motor power, we're using Garmin power metering pedals to determine how hard the rider is pushing, and then we will know which motor is basically the stronger one or is contributing the most. So when we're left with the result of, say, 50 watts, that means the rider was pushing 50 watts and the motor was doing the rest. If the result was 100 watts, we will know the motor did less of the work and the rider had to push harder. So that's our way of measuring how strong the motor is. At lower cadences, that's basically just measuring the power amplification of the motor. But as we get into higher cadence, we will reach the limit of the motor, and the rider input will vary significantly. We ride these bikes up a hill that takes just over a minute at 65 cadence and below half a minute when riding all out. Going up the hill with the Bosch Performance CX Gen 500 Newton meters in turbo mode in the 0 setting. I mean, it can be set between -5 and +5, and this bike was 0. The 65 cadence test was done in 1 minute, 6 seconds. And the rider had to pedal 88 watts. Now you'll notice, looking at the data, there is some difference between the time spent and also on the cadence. We're trying to match these bikes and motors as closely as possible, but there will be some differences. There are differences in the gear ratios, tire dimensions, wheel size. So as you'll notice, the Bosch Performance at 106 compared to the Specialized at 102, it's as close as we get. The problem with the Specialized is that it was quite powerful. We rode it in the maximum shuttle mode, maximum power, everything. And trying to maintain 65 cadence was pretty much impossible because the motor would kick in and you would pedal very carefully, but it would still ramp up. So we ended up at 68 cadence. So that explains the slightly faster time of this motor. And if you look at the power, 49 watts. That's basically nothing. And you could say pedaling 80 watts going up this steep hill on the Bosch motor, that's quite nice too. As I said, this isn't a very precise test, but in this case, I'd say the difference is significant enough to claim that the Specialized is more powerful at 60 cadence. And that's not really a big surprise, because Bosch always used to require a bit more cadence. They usually sacrifice a bit of power down low to have a motor that really screams at higher cadence. Looking at the DJI Avinox motor, 103, 64 cadence, 67 watts. A difference of 20 watts. It's not much of a difference, really. Riding these bikes, you go uphill, calm, rested, at nice speeds. Then it's the 80 cadence test. And as you'll see, the Bosch sort of comes alive. I mean, 96 watts. It did the climb in 55 seconds and an average cadence of 78. 96 watts, that's hardly an increase from the 60 cadence. And looking at the Specialized, that's even less of an increase. 49 watts still, 78 cadence, 55 seconds. And the DJI, it covered the climb in 49 seconds with the rider inputting 85 watts. So looking at the rider input, it's closer to the Bosch, but it's also quite a bit faster. So it's difficult to say which one is the most powerful in this test. Is it the Specialized or is it the DJI? They seem quite similar, I think. Okay, 100 cadence test next. The Bosch keeps improving, 43 seconds, and the rider had to push 113 watts. And the Specialized, finally the rider has to put in a bit more effort, 79 watts, and the climb was covered in the same 43 seconds. And the DJI, still a tad faster, so it might be that bike had a slightly different gear ratio. It did the climb in 40 seconds, and you had to pedal 88 watts, which is very close to the Specialized motor. There really is nothing between them, I'd say. A bit more watts, but also a bit faster. So to properly challenge these motors, we decided to do a 115 cadence test. We didn't do this test before, so we have only got data from the Specialized and the Bosch motor. And at 100 cadence, the Bosch covered the climb in 37 seconds. The rider was pushing 161 watts. And now, looking at the Specialized, you had to pedal 169 watts. So there is no difference. The final test, we tried to pedal all out as fast as we can go. And what is likely to happen is that you will reach the maximum torque, the maximum cadence limit of the motor. So as you go high enough, the power will start dropping off. The motor will be less efficient. You're outside the range it's designed to work. So looking at the DJI motor, it covered the climb in 32 seconds. The rider had to push 380 watts, and the average cadence was 129. So it seems we reached the limits of this 850 watts DJI Avinox motor. Next is the Bosch motor. It covered the climb in 29 seconds. The rider only pedaled 309 watts, and the average cadence 134. We're at basically the limit of the rider. Maintaining an average cadence of 135, it's not really that easy. And as he said, he was pushing over 150 and the motor was still keeping the power up. So it's a difficult exercise doing this test at these cadences. So looking at the data, just pedaling 309 watts, perhaps there is more room for improvement if he were able to pedal like 380 watts. Then it's the Specialized motor, the 3.1 S-Work, and it did it in 31 seconds. And as the test rider said, it didn't feel as if this motor would reach the same peak cadence as the Bosch motor. He was pedaling 433 watts, so even though the cadence was 135, he was doing more of the work. It seems the Specialized motor has reached its limits. And that's fine, because the Specialized motor, it's more powerful at 60 cadence, it's less powerful at 140 cadence. And if I were to choose, I probably would prefer a bit of extra support in 60 rather than 140. But it goes to show the Bosch design and the strength of the Bosch. You won't ever probably feel like you're pedaling too fast and the motor is dropping out. And that can be quite intense and fun, really. So which of these three motors is the strongest? Well, it sort of depends on which test you're looking at. Looking at these data, it seems the Specialized is more powerful down low. If you enjoy pedaling as fast as possible, if you want a motor that doesn't drop off as you pedal as fast as you're able to, then it's the Bosch. But there is very little separating these motors really, at least based on the data that we have collected. Now the Bosch was at a disadvantage in this test because this is a pre-production, pre-release software, and the Bluetooth hasn't been enabled in the software. So we had to ride the bike in the default settings, but the turbo mode, or all assistance modes, can be bumped to +5. Default is 0, you can take it down to -5 or up to +5. And at +5, chances are the Bosch motor will improve at lower cadence. And I don't expect it to perform any worse in any of these tests. And also the DJI motor with the 1000 watts software update, it will perform better at higher cadence, I believe. So all in all, sure, there can be some differences, but these are all three motors quite strong. So if you want a new modern EMTB with the strongest motor, I would look at a bike with either of these three motors. That's it. Appreciate any likes and subscribes. Thanks for watching.